Okay, we're ready, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we've had I've had indications that they were attending Dennis Meredith, Penny Flavo, Winston Strachan, and I think Danielle Stone as well. So welcome to the second executive meeting. I don't think it'll be terribly long, but let's have a discussion on all of these items. So item number one, to receive apologies for absence.
Chair, I received apologies from Councillor Richard Auger.
Thank you. Item two, notification of request to address the meeting. I think I saw a late one come in from Danielle.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. I believe she wants to address the committee on item 7.
Oh, the programme update, okay. So the minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. Do any members of the executive have any comments on page 5? I'm going on the report pack, page 6 or page 7. Are we all agreed that they're correct record? Agreed? So is it your wish then that I will sign them at some point? I'm not quite sure how we do an electronic signature, Paul, but let's just say they are approved.
Yeah.
So
Chair,
who's speaking?
Chair, could I just correct the officers present? Yes, I was there.
Apologies, yeah. I saw that email. Yes, you were there.
Thank you. But it's DDC, not SNC.
Oh, that's right. I saw that you were put down as being SNC. Yeah, we couldn't afford the transfer fees.
I'm sure you could.
I doubt it. Yes, well, I'm sure that Paul will make that minor correction. Yeah, it actually is on my notes here as well. So item 5, announcements. Members are asked to use the raise hand function should they wish to speak and to unmute their microphones, and all members should then try and remember to mute the microphones again when you've finished speaking. And will you keep an eye then on bringing people in, Paul, at the relevant moment from the waiting room? Or
yeah, I don't have anyone in the waiting room at the moment, Chair.
Okay, no problem. So item 6, assets, capital schemes and reserves notification. Andrew Huncan.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just trying to unmute myself, double multitasking again. So this report sets out a process for allowing discussions and conclusions to be reached on proposals from the existing councils concerning assets, capital schemes and reserves. Obviously, existing councils are free to continue to run their affairs and make decisions without taking into impact the impact on the new unitary councils. But we have to remember that with the new unitary councils coming in, then those resources, investments and assets will transfer there. So it would seem reasonable to make sure that we cooperate in managing those resources, investments and assets, so that if there is an impact on the unitary council, we are aware of them. The key areas covered by the process include the purchase, disposal and transfer of assets, new capital schemes with ongoing financial commitments, and use of reserves above those already set out in each council's budget. Turning to the process itself, which is Appendix 1, that sets out how we would actually deal with any notification, and also sets the de minimis level above which notification would be made at £100,000. And it also sets out the exceptions, which will be adult and children care packages, HR matters and issues. And so the proposal would be submitted by the existing council's chief executive to be discussed at the next meeting of the shadow executive, where they will act as a consultee and will be asked to endorse rather than approve a proposal put before it. So it is felt that this process will help us to manage this in a constructive manner, and Chair, the proposal is as in the report.
Any comments? Jonathan?
Yeah, sorry, just a quick comment. I'm completely signed up to this. It's just occurred to me, are we waiting for the formal, this type of formal meeting that a proposal is discussed at? Are you talking about a more informal environment? Do we have to wait until we have the next one of these meetings coming along if something crops up?
So the process sets out that it will come to the next meeting of the shadow executive, but it also sets out what we would do if the process there wasn't enough time to actually allow that to happen as well. So what you would actually be doing is to try and get it to a formal shadow executive meeting.
Jonathan?
Thank you. Thank you.
Matt?
Just say this seems perfectly reasonable, Chair, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Lizzie?
Just a quick question on the Appendix 1, the HR matters and issues. Can you give me an example of something that would be an exception to this rule?
Well, there's, first of all, let's say you were looking to appoint a new person to a vacancy, and what we're saying is that that's a matter for the existing councils to deal with at the moment. If you were looking to do any kind of redundancy packages within the existing councils at the moment, then that would be a matter for that council as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
I did see another hand. Phil?
Thanks, Ian. Is it possible, I mean, Northampton Borough is in the process of transferring a hell of a lot of open space, community centres, etc., through to parish town council, etc. Can we just put in a job lot saying for everything that we're considering on the basis that the parish or the town council may or may not take them or whatever? Can we just do that, say get it to the next meeting so we can proceed at the pace we're continuing to move at?
Obviously, it would depend on a case-by-case basis, but that sounds absolutely fine. And in essence, what we're saying within the process here is what we don't want is councils trying to break this down so that it actually is less than £100,000. So obviously, that's an example where it would be more than, and as so long as the detail was there, then I see absolutely no problem with that.
Thank you, Chair.
And I think too, the one thing that members ought to bear in mind as well, that government do have powers. It's a section 24 notice. I'm not sure section 24 of what piece of legislation, in which they can make it a legal requirement that this has to be done rather than a voluntary arrangement between ourselves. And they certainly issued one in the case of Buckinghamshire. So there's plenty of very recent precedent for doing it. And I see Teresa's waving at me.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to Councillor Larratt as well, it does say that anything that's already in a plan or anything that's already approved, so historic approvals or anything that's previously budgeted for, doesn't fall within this remit. It's from now, basically. And also just to let you know that the proposals that you've got around the disposals was shared across the chief execs across the West, and with members, I understand as well, or some of the leaders at least, or all of the leaders, and I don't think any of that fell into this category, so I don't believe there was any reason why you should wait or it should stall that process in any way.
That's great, Chair. Thank you very much indeed.
And we have been operating this as sort of an informal agreement. I remember at the Leaders Oversight Board, we did suggest this.
That's correct.
8-9 months ago, quite a while. So we have been doing it. I do remember bringing one myself to the Leaders Oversight Board of capital project we were doing in Toaster.
That's correct, Chair. We've just formalising the process tonight, but we have been operating under this arrangement.
So members of the executive, are you all in favour of the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Are there any against?
I think that's carried, Chair.
No, well, yeah, I think that's carried. We shall move on to item 7, Programme Director's update. Paul, the other one. Sorry.
Chair, and we're going to share these slides on screen with you. Paul's going to try to put the slides up so you can see which slides I'm talking to. Just bear with us.
Have you changed the pack that was sent out?
No, it's the same.
Occasionally, I know a slide gets tweaked, that's all.
They should be the same as what's in the pack that's come out to you.
Okay.
Can everyone see it?
So the update tonight is really on the preparations of the programme as it moves into the implementation phase. So I'm going to focus on the things that we've been doing and how we're preparing for that next very important step. And the first slide, the mobilisation plan, I won't go through the detail, but there are 2 ambers on there, one of which is around the emerging impacts of COVID and how that relates to those projects that were funded by the business rates retention pilots and the assessment of those and the impact. And I know Audra will talk a little bit more about that in the finance update later. So we're keeping that a watch on that one, and it's amber at the moment. The other one that I would like to point out is the work that's going on within the ICT programme to ensure that we've got the right starting point, the right baseline and the right approach to land those in the 4 main system replacements. And Richard Ellis is leading on that part of the work, and we'll be bringing a more detailed report to the next cycle on where that's at. But at the moment, we're saying the work there is amber until we move forward, and I'd be absolutely clear about the phases of implementation. So those are the only 2 points that I would make on that slide. Moving on to the next slide is really just for information. It's my senior management team in the programme, and it's just so members know who's working in which areas on the programme. Won't go into any detail, it's there in your packs for future information. The next slide, Paul, moving on, please. Just wanted to provide an update because although we're preparing the programme, we have been doing an immense amount of work during the lockdown period on establishing the blueprints for West Northamptonshire. And I just wanted to give an update on the progress. When we went into the lockdown, we were working really hard to understand in the time available how we'd be able to disaggregate as much as possible of the county council services, and that we believed at the beginning was going to be quite a challenge, and not knowing how COVID would pan out and when things would start to ease and improve to allow us to pick up the work. So I'm really pleased to say that the progress today, and we will bring this through formal governance when it's ready. And there are 3 components which I'll explain briefly, but I'm really pleased to say that we think we're going to be able to disaggregate very large amounts of county council services in the very high percentages, high 70s, 80% of services we will disaggregate for day one. There are some services where we need to manage and be slightly cautious about, and what we're planning there is that some services where we can't disaggregate them safely and legally for day one, we'll put them in a host authority, and what that would mean would be a temporary arrangement. Some of those might be for 3 months, some might be 6 months, but up to a maximum of about 12 months. And there's 1-2 services that might be a little bit longer, but that's a very small percentage of services. And the third component around the county council services is those that would make sense for them to be in a longer term lead authority arrangement, mainly transactional, where you get the economies of scale. So some services we will be recommending will go into a lead authority model for a longer period of time. But I would just like to stress we will bring that through formal governance, but we are making really good progress, which is really pleasing. The second part of the component is the work that we're doing now on finalising the numbers around the proportion of people that are working in the districts and borough services within specific areas. So as that starts to come through, and we're getting that coming through already, we will then overlay the districts and borough services onto the county council services. And that will provide, in essence, the service blueprint for the West Northamptonshire Authority. And as I say, bring that through governance. The third component is the finances, the affordability. And as we all know, any council, not just the work that we're having to do in Northamptonshire, setting the budget's an iterative process. We don't always know exactly what settlements will be right up until, around Christmas time, we can be finding out. So that's going to be an iterative process, but there is an important step in our process here that we've got 3 finance task and finish groups. And one of those task and finish groups is around the disaggregation of the county council's budget and how that comes together with the aggregated districts and borough services. And we need the outputs from that task and finish group to feed into the service blueprints to assess the affordability. So we're making good progress around that. And there are 2 other finance task and finish groups around council tax harmonisation and medium-term financial plan as well, which is all part of that iterative process that we'll be going through over the coming months. So just moving on to the next slide, the other key piece of work that we're doing, and this is just really to provide some assurance to you all in the assurance that we're putting into day one. So ensuring that everything in place for safe and legal on day one is an important element of the work that we've been doing. We're 95% of the way there. We'll be bringing that as an update through to the JIE this month. And basically what we're taking is there are about 50 to 60 essential requirements, which we're calling must-haves. Every service won't have all of those. Some will have some of them, and all of them will have some of them. So some sit across all of them and some might be specific. And there's just some examples listed there. So obviously we've got to have an agreed budget in place. We've got to identify line management. So for example, if we're bringing together 3 revs and bends service, who is it that members are going to refer to as the person accountable for that as an officer? So we have to have things like that in place. Obviously payroll is a critical part of that. So they form some of the must-haves. And then there's the detail that certain staff will need to have access to certain buildings, and then things like enforcement services will need to have the necessary warrants. So all that work is being done so that there'll be a set of tasks and objectives for every single service. And that'll be mapped through to a critical path that covers the sequencing of those things. So there might be 70, 80 plans going on, but every one of those plans has to align to that critical path. So when does it need to provide the HR data? When do we need to have the ICT information? All those things have to be brought together, and it's that critical path that does that. And the assurance is that that's being managed, and that we'll be reporting on that critical path right throughout to vesting day, from as soon as the programme goes into the implementation phase. I'll just pause there, see if there's any questions from members, then I'll move on.
Any questions? You're on a roll, Paul.
Okay, I'll keep going while the going's good. Thank you, Chair. So the next one, we'll be asking for approval and adoption of the change strategy. And I won't go through the report in detail. You've had a copy of it. I'll just draw out some key points. So this isn't the detailed plan. This is the strategy that all the individual change plans hang from those service designs and so on. So it is the overarching piece that we will will use to manage the change aspect. And really the change aspect, the day one assurance is really about the nuts and bolts and the wiring of the programme, those things that the project managers do, the project plans. This is the really important and critical piece of how we prepare people, how we take people on the journey with us. 5,500 or so employees, all stakeholders in this, all have a voice, all have an opinion, and we need to find ways to ensure that the engagement with the workforce is strong and thorough throughout the programme. As you know, we had around 300 change champions, and we had to pause our engagement with the change champions while we all dealt with the COVID crisis, and we've got clearance now to start to work through and engage with those change champions in this very important part of the programme. So I just wanted to really make the point that whilst we've changed the approach, the vision and mission hasn't changed. That ambition and aspiration is as strong as ever to deliver as much transformation as we possibly can and to ensure that we've got the methodologies and the capability in place to continue that journey after vesting day. So the vision is as strong as ever, and that should read strong and large through this strategy. And the framework provides the overarching objectives, guiding principles, the timelines and the toolkits that my team will be using to work with colleagues throughout all the 8 councils. As I say, the most important part of any organisation is creating and setting the right culture. So we can have ICT systems that work on day one, where the people are on day one, and the journey that we take those people on beyond day one is critical to how we deliver services to residents and the difference that the people make. It's not really about the projects and the objectives, it's the people that make a difference, and ensuring we have the right cultures, the right attitudes and the right behaviours is a critical piece to my way of thinking in this whole programme. So those are just the key points that I wanted to make. Happy to take any questions before we ask members to approve the strategy, Chair.
Any questions? Is Danielle still about? I have a email that says she wishes to speak on this item, but I don't see her on the call.
I don't think she is, Chair.
Okay, fine. Does anybody who's not a member of the executive wish to raise a point, and then I'll bring in the executive members? Don't see any hands going up. Okay, right, Adam.
Thank you. Just a quick question on the change champions. Probably through you, Chairman, a question to Paul. How are we doing in terms of numbers across the various authorities in the West? I mean, as portfolio holder for human resources at Daventry, I've had regular conversations with our HR manager there. She's been satisfied throughout that the number of change champions and the distribution of those people throughout the various service areas has been sufficient. Is that being mirrored in the other authorities in the West Northamptonshire region?
It is, Councillor Brown. We've got a good representation across all the organisations. What I will do is provide an update in the next report of the exact numbers, and I would also add that I'd ask members to reiterate the messages back in the authorities that whilst we've got a number of change champions, we can't have too many change champions. We will need more, especially as we get into the sharp end of implementation. That's going to be really critical. So we will be doing a re-engagement piece with all the existing change champions and be doing another push to recruit more change champions, and particularly looking at where we need representation in certain areas of the programme as well as specific authorities. But I will bring the updated information to the next executive and through the JIE as well.
Thank you.
And by that representation, are you saying there are things like if you've got 24 change championships but all sit in one department and none in any other department, that we would try to be wanting to get a a number of them throughout the whole of the council?
Exactly, Councillor McCord. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, making sure that we've got the right people in the right areas for the right implementations, and making their work much more focused. So throughout the design phase prior to lockdown, it was very much about getting them on board in the programme and asking them to support where they could and validate where they can and feed into us. It becomes an implementation, a much more specific role and more focused in specific activities. And then it's critical, as you rightly say, to make sure we've got the right numbers on the right areas.
Okay, any other comments or that on the report? So we've got the split into the Paul bit and the Audra bit. Do you want to approve it all at once, or do you want me to approve this bit first and then we'll do the finance bit?
I've just got one more slide to do on the.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And I just
Fair
wanted
enough.
to. And I just wanted.
Yeah, and then we'll bring Audra in for the finance part. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of comms and engagement, what we've done as well as part of rebaselining the programme is to revise the communication and engagement strategy, which is in place now. We've also, to support consultation as we go into implementation, set up an online consultation hub. We've had the first meeting of the members task and finish group for comms and engagement, and I'm hopeful that we'll start to see the outputs from that feed into the work that we're doing around comms and engagement, which would be very important to have that work involved and into the programme. As you all know, Chair, as you were part of it as well, we've got a video that we've produced, 2 videos, one for residents and one for colleagues in the workforce as well. Those have been circulated. We've had some good feedback on those, and they're there to use as we go forward. And promoting the YouTube channel is just the last thing I wanted to say, to viewing the shadow meetings, which we've been doing. If I could, Chair, as well, could I just ask that, I know Audra's going to present the finance report, but I just wanted to make a point on the finances and how we've reorganised the programme, if I may, as I finish. Is that okay, Chair?
It's Audra's permission you need, not mine.
Oh, well, I spoke to Audra this afternoon. She was fine with it this afternoon.
She's giving you a thumbs up. Go on.
Okay.
She'll correct any mistakes you make in a minute. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I just wanted to say that whilst you'll note there's some changes to the figures, the base cost of the programme hasn't changed, around about that £44 million. And I just wanted to remind members that way back at Christmas time, we started to report to the Joint Executive that we were developing the transformation strategy for the County Council to work in line with it, setting its budget. And what we said to the Joint Executive in the West was that we would be introducing that strategy along with the costs of that and also the financial benefits. So what you will see, and what Audra will explain in more detail, is that a large chunk of that, over £8 million of that, is what we were advising, but we couldn't confirm until it went through council in the County Council's budget setting process. So those aren't new costs. The costs that are totally met by the County Council, and the benefits that are derived, the long-term benefits for the benefit of the West Northamptonshire Council when it becomes an operating council on the 1st of April. I just wanted to make that point. And the other point I'd like to make is that in the reorganisation of the programme, and the reprofiling of the transformation activity, we've also built into that a 2-year transformation programme with a costed resource that has been done at no extra cost of the existing districts and borough councils and the County Council, and at no cost to the new unitary council when that becomes live. So we've managed to do that within the existing envelope of funding that we've had. And I just wanted to make those 2 points before I hand over back to the Chair, and then for Audra to take you through the detail. Thank you, Chair.
Any comment on that? The finances bit probably best leave until Audra comes through. But anything else to say on what Paul has just talked about? Don't see any. Okay, we'll move on. Audra, finances, please.
Okay. Good evening, members. The report in front of you, as Paul has just highlighted, we've moved on from 1920 into 2021 and wrapped up, as he's just mentioned there, some of the transformation that's taking place in the County Council as well. But also in light of the pandemic, I should say, we've also reviewed, after pressing the reset button for this whole programme, we've reviewed all of the projects that are in there that are delivering the saving. And the report in front of you highlights now that movement from 1920, where the original budget was the 43.5 million thereabouts, and moved it on to reflect those two things. I think, as Paul has mentioned, the important thing to note that the original budget of the 43.4 million, that was made up of three main items. We had the contribution from each of the 8 authorities towards the LGR work. We had the business rates pilot money to deliver all of the business rates projects that you'll see in the appendix. And then we had the County Council's transformation programme in there that was delivering. So there's a couple of points I want to make. That's where we've moved from the 43 million up to the 53, is encompassing those projects now that are part of the County Council's base budget. So again, no additional costs coming from each of the 8 authorities, but also reviewing what we can and can't deliver in light of the pandemic, and also taking it beyond vesting day. Now that we're doing day 1 safe and legal, some of the projects have been profiled now beyond vesting day, and some of those savings will be delivered later on. What I would also say is that of the £53 million that we're investing, is the savings that's delivered of 84.4 million. And I know that I've been asked the question in the past, you know, how robust are those savings? Are we just coming up with these numbers? And what we have to remember is that of that 84.4 million, a large chunk of those savings have already been delivered by the County Council in 1920. So if you like, they're in the bag, and moving forward, that's what we'll be building on going forward, as well as the results from all of the business rates pilots. As part of the review of the costs and doing the reset button and setting up all the new projects and work streams, Paul has also reviewed what he needs as an LGR team. So we were able to reduce, for instance, the backfill budget that we had, because now the whole team has been costed. We don't need that there as a contingency. Also, the shadow member appointments were not needed in full. Obviously, the elections were cancelled in May, so we don't have any duplication of new member costs, as well as all those ones that still exist. So we were able to reduce that. And also the programme contingency itself, which was around the £3 million mark. There's an enormous amount of work that has taken place already. And as you know, contingencies, you review the likelihood of you needing them along the way. And as we're so far down this journey now, we were able to review that as well and reduce it accordingly. So that's the headlines really. This is not a programme that has increased in costs from 43 to 53. It's a programme that now amalgamates, just like we did in 1920 for some of the schemes that are being delivered by the County Council. And it's about having that under one programme heading. It's really important. This is not an increase in the costs of the LGR, and there's certainly no additional costs to any council taxpayers. On that note, Chair, I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions for Audra? I was just going to say, before I see Matt, but just before Matt comes in, is there anybody who's not in the executive wants to ask a question, and then the executive members can have that in any discussion we wish to have? Don't see any indicating. Okay, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a point around that contingency. I understand what you've just said there, Audra. So what level of contingency do we still have in this current year then? As one would expect, it's a wise thing to have a certain level.
Absolutely. And if you go to table 4, other programme costs, you'll see that the contingency amount is just short of 2.2 million. $2.193 to be precise.
Yeah, 4th line up from the bottom.
Yeah. It's still a healthy contingency amount for what we need to deliver.
Any other questions? Martin, you're the interim 151. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but if you have anything to say on that, you're going to dare to say anything different to Audra?
No, nothing to add to what Audra said. You know, summarised it perfectly well. It's just reporting slightly differently than it was reported previously, but the overall costs haven't increased. The burden on the council taxpayer hasn't increased. So nothing further to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it. Nobody else want anything to say? I'll move the recommendations. So I'll move the recommendations that executive notes the progress being made to mobilise the programme ready for implementation, approves and adopts the change management strategy, and notes and approves the finance monitoring report. All those in favour?
Chair, forgive me for coming in. You need a seconder for your proposal, please.
Okay.
Happy to second.
Hand, I think. Oh, right, Jonathan to second. Thank you. Right, so those in favour? I think that's everyone.
You're on mute, Councillor McCord.
Oh, thank you. That's carried. I didn't see any against. No, right, so that's carried. Last item, urgent items, of which there are none. And I think we're at the end of the meeting. Yeah, there's no exempt items, there are no urgent items. So we will close the meeting at 18:39. Thank you all for your attendance, and we'll all meet again next month, I think.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Cheers.